Hi, everyone. We're going to start in 1 minute. Okay, let's start. Hello, everyone, and welcome. It's my great pleasure to introduce Dr. Boaz M, who will be our speaker today and talking about cognitive, sensory, and communication challenges for older adults during COVID-19 social distancing. Boaz is an associate professor at the School of Psychology, the Interdisciplinary Center in Herzliya, Israel, where he leads the Communication, Aging, and Neuropsychology Lab and the Program for Law and Psychology. He holds adjunct faculty positions at the University of Toronto in the Department of Speech-Language Pathology and at Toronto Rehab. He's interested in the interaction of cognitive, sensory, and social processes involved in speech processing and production, especially with older adults. He's also interested in the complex interplay that governs the perception of emotions in speech in different populations and the validity of tests in older adults. Please join me in a virtual round of applause to welcome Boaz. You're mute.
How often do we get this? You're on mute. When you want to say something smart, and then of course you're on mute. Is there any way that I can see the faces of the attendees, or is it not? This is not how it works here.
Unfortunately, for the webinar version, you're not able to see the faces, but we have 32 attendees right now.
Okay, no, I want
36.
Oh, 36 now total.
So first, thank you all for coming, and I'm going to imagine all of you looking, super excited, laughing at all of my jokes, and your mouth agape, and you're amazing. So I'm going to just pretend that this is what's happening right now. I'm super excited to be here. I see some of the attendees were my colleagues. One of them was my mentor, and I'm very, very excited to present here. And I hope it will work well for us. I want to start with presenting myself. So I'm a cognitive psychologist. I work here at IDC Herzliya. This is the first private university here in Israel. We're located in a suburb of Tel Aviv. It's sort of a quiet, nice suburb of Tel Aviv. We have our equivalent of a 401 splitting Herzliya in two, and the other half is where the rich and famous live, next to the beach. Unfortunately, I'm located on the wrong side of the tracks. This is where my university is. And I am also affiliated in speech-language pathology at University of Toronto and in Toronto Rehab. I love this picture. This is a picture taken from the first lab of psychology by Wundt in Leipzig, 1879. And as you can see, you have a lot of people sitting around the table. And for me, it's a nice metaphor for what we need when we study aging. We can't just have one researcher, only cognition, only social psychology, only clinical psychology, only brain studies. No, we need a lot of different scientists, a lot of different views of point to understand aging. This is why I believe aging is so interesting, and it's the forefront of science. I'm super, super fortunate in my lab here in IDC. I have PhD students that come from different fields. I have a cognitive psychologist, but I have a clinical psychologist, social psychologist, and a brain scientist, and of course, two speech-language pathologists. I keep faith to University of Toronto department, and I'm learning a lot from them, and I'm giving them more and more freedom to teach me to understand more about aging. This is usually how my talks look like. This is a nice place outside of my university where we have Thursday evening talks during the summer, This is, this is how Herzliya summer nights look like. In my last presentation, there were 1,800 people coming, and they wanted to hear more about aging. This is fun, and I love this. Unfortunately, this is not the case that we get right now. Before I move to talk about Zoom, I have one more slide to share. This is me 20 minutes ago in my classes. This is the second week that we have real live classes here at IDC. It's super exciting. It's just unbelievable. You can actually see human beings and they respond to you and they laugh at your jokes, or they show in their faces that they didn't get what you're talking. It's like a real interaction. Unfortunately, this is not the case in most of the world right now, and it was not the case in Israel 2 weeks ago. And I've renamed my talk at Zoomastrope because it's a Zoomastrope. And it's mostly a Zoomastrope for older adults. So I'm going to talk a lot about my mother. So this is my mother, the original Professor Ben David. She was there before me. She's a criminologist. She was one of the leading researchers that started studying sexual offenses and victims of sexual offenses here in Israel and in the world. She was very active in the first laws that were drawn in Israel regarding the rights of victims of sexual assault. And during COVID, something happened to her. She lost a large chunk of what she considers herself. She couldn't go to university. She couldn't go outside and meet people. She stayed at her home. She was terrified because, as we know, before vaccinations, in her age range, and she is now almost 82, if she, God forbid, was infected with COVID, there is a good chance of her finding herself at the end in a hospital. So she was very, very careful. And in the beginning, we didn't know, right? Could she go outside? Is it safe, right? Remember the beginning. And she's living on her own in a nice big house. Now the house is empty completely. And she's the only one there. And everything that was her life has been taken away from her, right? We've suffered as well, but I suffered from too many human beings around me. My kids, my partner, they're all around. We used to take turns in the car, going to the car to have like a half an hour of a breather. Fortunately for us, the car is super close to our home, so we can maintain the 100 meters quarantine while staying in the car. But it was not the case for my mother. And she has not recovered from COVID. I have permission to discuss her. She's not recovered. It affected her emotionally. It affected her well-being. It affected her cognitively. And I want to talk about this and about this pandemic that affected older adults all over the world. And I believe the price we will see in the coming years. This talk is based on an old version of a talk. In the old version of a talk, I talked about neuropsychological tests. This is a talk I used to take around hospitals in Israel, trying to convince doctors and other people in the medical field that neuropsychological tests are ageists. And I use this slide and I say, we all think that neuropsychological tests are just like measuring your height. Here is a neuropsychological test. Try to figure out what is the right answer here. And you hear task instructions. The answer is 5, by the way, if you missed it. And what's the problem? We can test older adults, younger adults, no problem whatsoever. However, I maintain that neuropsychological tests are not like height because there are visual changes, auditory changes, and there are social effects like stereotype threat. All of these affect your ability to perform in a neuropsychological test. Our model, and at the end I'll give some references if you want to cite me, please do. Our model was this. We observe reduced performance in aging. We assume that there is a mandatory age-related cognitive decline that happens all across the board, not in specific places, all across the board. It's super robust. We assume that our tests are valid. Therefore, when we observe reduced performance, we say, well, it shows that there is an age-related cognitive decline. We are right, and the tests are valid. So we keep taking these tests and we never change them. However, what I'm trying to claim, unfortunately, I'm not the only one, is that there is a sensory context and a social context that affects the ability of older adults to perform at their real ability when they are conducting cognitive tests. This is also true, I'll try to say today, when they're trying to negotiate life during social distancing. And actually, everything that I'm going to talk about today, I'm going to stop with the evidence that I have in my model and try to implement it on COVID. So I'm going to talk about visual changes in aging and how they affect cognitive performance, auditory changes, social changes that relate to interaction, social changes that relate to ageism, and they're all true when we're conducting tests in the lab. But when COVID came, it became twofold or even tenfold more important. That's the point I'm going to try to make today. So let's start with sensory effects. Now, if you have questions, please place them on chat. She looks so much younger than 82, I agree. But she is as wise as an 82-year-old. Okay, so going back to my chat. So here are sensory effects. I'm going to start with this story. If you've heard it before, please don't tell everybody the end. I just want to make sure if you are fans of spiders, no spiders were harmed in the making of this fake story. Okay, it's a story about a mad scientist and the spider. The mad scientist wanted to know how well can a spider see. Therefore, he trained the spider to jump whenever he sees this. Okay, you're with me? Whenever he sees this. Now, I'm not sure if you ever tried to train a spider. It's not easy. Do not try it at home without the assistance of an adult. So he tried it for a week and a month and 2 months and 3 months and 4 months and a year. And he doesn't know that COVID started, that vaccination happens. He's still locked in the lab. And then one day he did this and the spider jumped. It was unbelievable. He could start his study. So a spider has 8 eyes. If you don't believe me, look it up on Wikipedia. I didn't count. I didn't catch a spider and count the eyes. I looked it up on Wikipedia. So he has 8 eyes. It has 8 eyes, sorry. And day one, the scientists anesthetized, so blurred the vision in one eye. So the spider has 7 eyes. Let's see if you're alive on chat. What do you think? A spider with 7 eyes. Will you respond to this? What do you think? Let's see if chat works. Again, spider, yes, okay, I have somebody. Thank you. This is a test of liveliness in the room. Okay, yes, with 7 eyes it could work. And then in day 2, he blurred the vision in 2 eyes. He did this, and the spider jumped. Day 3, 3 eyes. And then on day 8, the scientist blurred the vision in all 8 eyes. He did this, and the spider didn't jump. The spider didn't jump. He didn't believe it. He tried it again. He did this, and the spider didn't jump. He ran to his office and published a paper in Science with the header, "A spider without eyes cannot think." Now, of course, this is ridiculous. It's not that the spider couldn't think. He just couldn't see well. However, what we try to maintain is we do the same thing with older humans. We make the same mistake. We mistake sensory changes with cognitive changes. This is based on Lindeberg and Boltes. They placed it in 1994, and there is a seminal paper by Schneider and Picora Fuller from University of Toronto. The idea is that we think that age affects cognitive performance. However, when we add vision and hearing, it could explain a lot of the variance. In this first paper in 1994, I believe it was something like 93% of the variance could be explained just by testing vision and hearing. And this is a big thing. So now let's start with the eyes. This is a study conducted when I was doing my postdoc with Bruce Schneider in University of Toronto, Mississauga. What we have done, we've taken this Stroop test. You should say here green, and here yellow, and green, and red, and green. This is horrible. Even in English, it is horrible for me. And what we've done, we have desaturated the colors, trying to somewhat mimic an older eye. What we're able to do is to inflate Stroop effects. Therefore, we're able to take a young adult to perform just as if they were older adults. We tested it in some meta-analyses. Here is one example. You can see this is information for 13 real studies with older adults. And here are our own students, only with a desaturated set. And you can see they look just like older adults. This is my voyage. You can see I tried to publish a few papers on this. The revolution didn't come. People still believe that Stroop is a good test for aging. I wasn't able to convince the literature that it's a good test, but it tests color vision, not only cognition, but I can still try. Some preliminary work we're doing in our lab. We were in the midst of replicating in study 3 when COVID happened, and now we're slowly trying to get back to it. The idea is we took the MoCA that comes from Montreal, again Canada, and we simply increased the font. And what we're able to do in an A4 page, there was a big difference in score between students and older adults. In an A3 page, these differences were eliminated. Now what we're doing is we're doing something even more. We're trying to do some sort of a redesign of a few tests with a school of design, with a lot of thought. We're trying to see if we can inflate the score of the same older adults with equivalent sets of the test to see if the tests themselves are biased in their design against older adults, not from malice, of course, but because of maybe some oversight. We'll see. The effect is so huge, so we had to replicate it. I myself looking at this, not sure I believe this is true. We'll see. Tip of the hat again to KITE from Toronto. Older adults with sensory loss were twice as likely to score on as pre-dementia. Twice as likely. There is a beautiful review of the literature by Monge and Madden in 2016, for those of you who are interested, that shows the link between sensory decrease, specifically in vision, and performance in tests, cognitive tests in general. So now let's relate it to COVID. Can you see well on Zoom? Do you use your glasses on telehealth? Do we remember to ask our participant when we conduct studies online or when we do telehealth, do you have glasses? If you do, please wear them. Do you dare leave home for physical activity that is recommended during COVID if you cannot see well? Maybe you don't, so you stay at home. Can you read the instructions that you get, again, the telehealth or with any kind of video communication? Maybe not. Ears, chapter 2. Again, tip of the hat, and these are a lot of studies that I like. 1/3 of elders with hearing loss who were already diagnosed with pre-dementia were reclassified as having a lesser degree of dementia, or even reclassified outside of the classification back to MCI when the test was administered using sound amplification or fitting hearing aid. These are two amazing studies. I haven't seen a replication of them recently. If you know of a replication, please let me know. But they make sense to me. They make sense to me. You need to hear instructions to be able to perform on a test. So if you can't hear well, you may not be able to perform at your full capacity. COVID-19, again, about leaving home. Do you care Do you dare leave home for physical activity if you cannot hear well? So there is an interesting work done in Finland about life space mobility, and they show here, this is this thing here, they show that walking difficulty was not predictive of your decision not to leave home. However, if you have hearing problem, then it is an indicator of your failure to leave home. So people with hearing impairment choose to stay more at home. It's a very interesting study in Finland, but I can move to studies from Canada. Hearing loss increases the risk of falls by 93%. Kopinafmi claims that it is 1.5-fold every 10 dB loss. In Statistics Canada 2006, 65% report mobility difficulties if they have hearing difficulties. So the two seems to connect. Here is work done in Toronto with Bruce Schneider in 2011. What we have shown in a complex eye tracking study. I'm not going to go into the details, they're not very important, but the idea is that we were able to get the same performance for older adults and younger adults simply by changing the noise presented to the two groups. So by tailoring something that relates to hearing difficulty, as we maintained, we're able to get the same performance, not in accuracy, but in actual online processing as the world unfolds in time using eye tracking. Here is some new work I've done in Israel. Here is my student Gal Nitzan, who is an audiologist and a speech-language pathologist and doing a PhD with me. I'm super lucky. And what we have done is we said, hey, in most studies, we test speech in noise, but nobody sits in a lab listening to a single word and answer it. Usually, I'm not sure about you, when I listen to conversation, I actually do something else, like listening to the whole sentence or driving or walking or whatnot. So what we have done is we somewhat mimicked it by asking people to memorize digits, either memorizing 4 digits or 1 digits. We played around it. What I want to show you here is just one piece of evidence. What we see here is that individuals with better working memory capacity, as you can see the line here, were much better. They were earlier to identify the word. This is their chances of looking on the word, which indicates that they were able to get it, than people with lower capacity. In other words, as the word unfolds in time, they are much quicker to get it. So how is it related to our story? In our new study now, we're trying to ask, could this play a role in aging? If we see a decrease in aging in this specific working memory capacity, could it explain some of the differences we see in speech processing in noise when we have a really difficult task? And part of our PhD is exactly to test this. So if you invite me next year, maybe I'll have some better answers. Now COVID. This is me as you see me gasping. So here is a face mask. I'm not sure if you've ever seen this ever in your life, right? Never. So when I'm placing this on my face, a few things happen. Of course, my voice is softer and distorted. There is a low pass filtering, which impairs intelligibility. We have some new data that says, like in the lab, like literally this month, we've done this and recorded people with masks and played it to people on audio. And we believe it also changes the processing of emotions that the speaker conveys. Of course, you lose visual information that impairs lip reading, facial expression, context, and of course, turn taking. It's not clear to us who is talking if there are 3 people talking and they're wearing face masks. Of course, if you are maintaining the 2-meter distance, then the problem even increases. And now we get to Zoom. Of course, there is, and I'm sure you're all aware of this, there are distortion, there are glitches, there is a delay, there's sometimes loss of synchrony, multiple speakers. All of this impair our ability to understand speech in noise, specifically speech on Zoom. Again, specifically if you are an older adult. The risk is that people blame themselves, using the famous attribution error that I'm stealing from social psychology, not understanding that the blame is on the damn machine and on people talking together or whatnot, blaming themselves, thinking, oh no, something is wrong with me. I'm old. That's it. Time to pack and leave because I can't hear anything that happens on Zoom. And this is risky, specifically if we're now rethinking how we provide services to populations that need to stay at home using video conference. Sum up thus far, vision impacts, decrease in vision impacts cognitive performance. It impacts lip reading, that impacts our ability to understand speech. Masks and Zoom harm our ability to understand speech. And of course, all this leads to cognitive performance. If I'm following the Schneider-Piccola-Fuller theorem, we have a limited capacity, cognitive capacity. If I'm throwing more and more of my limited capacity to simply try to understand what the other person is saying, I do not have enough to use for higher cognitive processes, to use my intelligence, to use my wisdom. And if this is the situation, maybe I shouldn't leave home. If this is the situation, maybe I shouldn't engage in telecommunication. And this leads to loneliness. I'm citing this study for the last 10 years in all of my talks because when I read it, I thought like, this is it. I encourage you to look at it. It's a nice study and it's a nice series of studies. The idea is that they have examined people post-mortem, the brains of people, the post-mortem. Some of these people had dementia as tested in all of the neuropsychological tests and interviews, and some of them were classified as MCI or as completely healthy. However, some of the people not classified with dementia had these tangles that we know, unfortunately. And they tried to figure out what is the cause, what is the one thing that could explain why these people were spared. And their claim was that the reason is a social network, maintaining a large social network. I think it's a no-brainer why maintaining a social network is so important to maintain healthy cognitive performance, healthy life in older age. However, I can tell you, if you're interested, there are a lot of studies now specifically trying to understand, is it specifically the fact that we are exercising our cognitive abilities, or is it more related to exercising our social abilities? Or maybe it is more related to fitting together with a person. However, all of this, of course, is lost if you're stuck at home, feeling that the blame is on you. So this leads me to number 3, social context, the human touch. Here is a study I was involved with, which is now available online. I call it, "And Synchrony is what we need, my friend." Because there's no, you know this song, I believe. I'm not gonna sing. So what we have done, was like a group of 8 people Most of them were clinicians working in a hospital. We took older adults, 70 to 90, I believe one of them was even older than that, and we played with them a mirror game. I'm going to show you the mirror game exercise so you get what I'm talking about. I have a video here. There is no sound. So this is the patient and this is the clinician. What I want you is to try to guess who is leading. It takes about 7 minutes to reach this level. Try to guess who is leading. And if one of them is leading or not. So their aim in this stage of the game is to move together in a way that a person looking at them in the outside would not be able to guess who initiated the movement. This is like complete synchrony that we get when we are sitting with a person next to us. I think it's amazing. And so we've conducted this study. Sorry, let me get back. Our control was a simple physical exercise, and we had measures before and after to see what's happening. We measured many things. I'm going to show you just two. What we found is that these 10, 12 minutes of interaction were able to increase some parts of the MoCA, but not the physical exercise. We're also able to get faster identification of the spoken word in noise. We took one word that sounds very similar to another word in Hebrew. They had to differentiate between the two, and you can see they were faster after this game. There are many reasons why it worked. I'm not going to get into them. There is interesting studies done by one of my colleagues there when she has two people sitting together, moving together in some synchrony. She's showing some interesting facts of what we call two-brain studies, showing that the brains are synced together. But we lost that. We lost that now that COVID came. Here's another study conducted in my lab, led by this student who is a clinical psychologist, Shir Nagar. We asked people in the first stage, please send us a digital high-quality picture of the face of a person you love, someone you feel you can trust, that makes you feel secure, and who will be available and responsive should you be in need. And I have here the picture of my partner, Adi. This will be our secure condition. After we've done that, we invite the person for 2 separate sessions, separated by 2 weeks. In both sessions, we test their hearing. In one session, they see the picture of the person that they feel secure with. In another one, it's a control person that matches tone of skin, facial expression, etc., etc. We had 2 conditions to control. Let's forget the data. As you can see, we're able to get 2 dB difference in auditory threshold in a PTA, 2 dB difference, both in older adults and in younger adults. Of course, older adults' hearing thresholds were different than younger adults' hearing threshold, but the 2 dB was very, very, very similar. And this is something that we are very excited about. It's a paper now in revisions. And if you are my reviewer in Psych Science, I love you. You are awesome, and you're looking great today. So to summarize thus far, we talked about social interaction as super relevant to cognitive performance. We talked about the presence of a loved one as important to us. During COVID, we sometimes cannot be with our loved ones because they're living in different homes and we're in quarantine. We talked about the importance of the physical presence of others to get us more attuned. And again, because of COVID, right now we're not sitting in the same room and I cannot enjoy spring in Toronto. We're of course all at our homes, which again leads us to loneliness. And here's item number 4, social context ageism. This is an ad that I love taking from a campaign in the UK. I think it's 10 years old. I took different people and they gave them like a best before 65. And the idea is that nobody has a shelf life. Unfortunately, this kind of negative aging stereotype has not decreased during days of COVID, it has increased. Let me start with a definition for those of you who do not remember Psychology 101. When we talk about, we can talk about the predicament arising from a negative aging stereotype on cognitive decline. And this is experienced as a self-evaluation threat, leading to decreased performance, thus fulfilling the ageist prophecy. This kind of loop is causing you to fail because you believe everybody is expecting you to fail, my fair lady, right? If everybody expects you to fail, you will fail. And if you believe that this test is testing you specifically for something you are supposed to fail at, you will fail. And here is how all ads to all studies on aging look like. We're looking for somebody who is age 65 to 80 for a cognitive study. Now, if you are 65 to 80, you know you have been recruited to the study because you are an older adult, right? When I recruit students, I'm just saying I need students. They don't know if I need them because I'm studying, for example, different types of attachment, different types of extroversion. They don't know. I just say, students, come to my lab for a study. They do it all the time. But when I recruit older adults for the study, they know they are recruited because they're older adults. And they know that I expect them to get a different score from younger adults. Or else, why would I test it, right? I test it because I believe there is a difference. I'm not saying I'm looking only for women for the test or only for males for the test. I'm saying I'm looking only for older adults for the test. Here is a beautiful study in psychological science in 2014. I'll go over it super quickly. The idea is this: if you conduct the full Wechsler and you ask before it, you ask people how old you are, please mark across the line between 0 to 120. You can see that on baseline, they get one age, and on post-test, they believe themselves to be older. So the subjective age has increased by 5 years. It happens only to older adults in cognitive tests, not to younger adults. It happens only on memory tests, not on vocabulary tests, because older adults know that they have a better vocabulary and they know that this is the cliche. However, they fear of memory loss and they fear that people judge them harshly if there is a memory loss. So of course, if there is a memory test, they feel 5 years older. And here comes study 4. My favorite and why I love this study. The participant came to the lab. He got this line from 0 to 120. They asked him, how old do you feel? And people indicated their age. Then the research assistant read the instruction of the study. In this study, we're going to test your memory. We're going to read digits and ask you to repeat the digits. If I say 5, 6, you need to say 5, 6. I'm going to increase blah, 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 blah. And then she says, Boaz is going to kill me. He's such a horrible mentor. When you filled the line on the computer, it got erased. Here is my iPad. Can you please mark again your subjective age? Sure, I'll do it for you. And the older dog takes the tablet, marks her or his age again. And just by reading the instructions, people feel older already by 5 years. So this stereotype threat is active at the moment we tell older adults we're testing their cognitive performance. We're testing their memory. And of course, it affects our ability to perform. And I think I'm sure you've heard about these studies in the past. Here's just one of them. You take two groups. To one group, you're saying you'll fail. To the other group, you're saying you'll succeed. And of course, you see a difference in performance. Here it was even tested with cognitive tests, and he was able to move people above and below the cutoff. Now, again, kudos to University of Toronto. Here's a saying by Picora Fuller on situation in which hearing and understanding is most challenging. Let's see what she says. Number one, this situation needs to be novel and noisy. Number two, it needs to be unpredictable. Number three, has a threat to the self. Number four, give you a sense of lack of control. In other words, this is Zoom or any type of video conferencing for older adults. It is novel and noisy. It is unpredictable if you're not used to using this kind of communication, or if you have to teach on Zoom. Hi to all of you teaching on Zoom. Of course, it's a threat to self. Because I know everybody thinks that I can't deal with computers because I'm old. I know. I can see it. And it gives you a sense of lack of control. How do I start recording? Where is the button to share? Can I stop sharing what's going on here? Here is everything that Kathy mentions at situation which hearing is most challenging, and we have it all on Zoom. And now let's move to ageism, even one level higher. So we talk about threat to self. We show that threat to self impacts our ability to perform, impacts even cognitive tests. And now let's talk about COVID and ageism. Here are a few statements. I'm just, have to. Here's Texas State Lieutenant Governor who suggested that sacrificing the elderly to save the economy. If you remember, this was a very common saying, unfortunately, in the beginning of the pandemic. Hospitals in Italy, some of them use 65 as a cutoff age for some health services. In the New England Journal of Medicine, they came up with regulations regarding how to treat people in a pandemic. And this is their idea, balancing saving more life against saving more years of life. Let me say it again, saving more lives against saving more years of life. In other words, if you're 20 and you have 70 more years in front of you, maybe you're worth more than somebody who is 60. I don't know what's right. I cannot judge. Fortunately for me, I'm not an ethicist, and I don't know how to solve this issue, and I'm not a medical doctor, so I'm away from this. But this saying tells older adults something. And they see it over the news, all over. Now, because I can't see your faces, I can say a statement that is a bit provocative, but it hurts me a lot. In Israel, we had 6,300 people die of COVID in a short time period because of some big mistakes we've made here before vaccinations hit. Big mistakes we've made. Of course, most of them, the vast majority of them, were older adults. I have a feeling that if the vast majority of them were kids, people would have reacted differently. And I think this is true all over the world. And again, I'm sorry for being provocative, but I think that older adults who open the news on a daily basis understand that people maybe do not view their lives as valuable as the lives of young children. And this has an effect. This has an effect. We see it in studies. I gave some names here. Palgi and Bodner, they've used the fact that we have in Israel this quick turnaround of cycles of quarantine, vaccination, and they've done many measures of depression and feeling of self-doubt in older adults during this period, and we see the numbers, and they're scary. They're very scary. And this leads me to a talk by Barbara Weinstein from CUNY that I liked. She says what's happening is the tension between social isolation and loneliness. Social isolation is objective. This is the objective lack of social contact with others. Nothing we can do about it. Loneliness is a state of mind in which people feel alone. They feel unwanted. This is the subjective feeling of being isolated. And if you were to read her studies, she maintains that loneliness is the health risk, not isolation, the feeling of loneliness. And this is where we as a society have responsibility to bear, because this is where we can have an effect as a society to reduce loneliness even during times of social isolation. So to summarize, because I think my time is almost up, we talked about visual changes. If I can't see well, I can't understand, and it impacts my life on telehealth. We talked about auditory changes. If I can't hear well, it impacts my ability to perform cognitively, and it is extremely more intense when people are wearing masks. We talked about how important are social interactions to maintain healthy life across the lifespan. This, of course, cut during COVID. We talk about ageism and how ageism is a real threat to our quality of life, to our health, physically and cognitively, and the fact that it is increasing during COVID-19. And now I'm trying to challenge myself. So I'm taking the model I presented like 6 years ago in a paper, and now I'm saying, here is Zoom. There is a conversation, and you're supposed to give an intelligent answer on a Zoom meeting or in Zoom conference. However, there are visual changes you can't see well, auditory changes you can't hear well, and stereotype threat. This is not for you. Computers are not for you. Come on, you're 80. And of course, it impacts your ability to have an intelligent answer in an intelligent conversation and to take your potential out and to show who you are. Here is a list of just an example of one of the papers we've published this year. It shows challenges and opportunities for telehealth. We're trying to maintain everything we've done to be able to run studies on older adults during social isolation. And we list everything. Feel free to read it and comment on it. And what we can do, and to summarize in telehealth or when we're doing testing on Zoom, is to think about our stimuli visually and audibly, to ensure the use of corrective aids, to always ask, can you see well? Should you increase? Do you use your eyewear? To think about social and physical interaction and to increase them in the population, specifically in older adults, and to fight ageism. To reduce stereotype threat and to fight ageism. And it's super easy to do. You can change the location, you can change the experimenter, the time of testing, instructions. There are many ways that we can reduce stereotype threat and fight ageism. One of the simplest solution that I offered to no avail to our post services is to have an older adult sitting there assisting other older adults with the fact that now everything is computerized. If you cannot activate an app that has like 5 different layers, it took me like 5 minutes to figure out, you cannot get your mail from the post office, which is crazy. And I offer them, could you just place an older adult there, pay money, or her, of course, and let her help people to maintain the app. Let's do something that is constructive. Let's teach people how to use apps instead of expecting them to use them. It didn't work. So I want to finish my talk with going back to my mother. So indeed, there are changes in cognitive performance with my mother in aging, specifically after COVID. Her working memory is not as good as it used to be. For example, if she needs to memorize digits, I'm better. And here are my two girls, Noga and Nilab and David, aged 9 and 13, on the beach. And they're excellent in memorizing digits. They're better than me. However, even though they're better in working memory, they cannot cross the streets without me. Because there's something I possess that they don't, and it's not related merely to cognitive performance. And when I try to navigate the politics of university with my new role and all the other mess, I call my mother. It is true that I can memorize digits better than her, but she has something that I have 30, 40 more years to gain to get, and it is wisdom. And let's not forget that this is something that is super important that older adults have, and we forget to test, we forget to use, and we forget to empower. And that is my talk. Thank you so much.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for a really wonderful and engaging talk. So just
should I answer
yeah, I think there are a couple of questions.
Read the question? Maybe you want to read that question?
No, you can read that. And just a reminder to everyone
else. I can't hear
you
for some reason.
Oh, hello. Can you hear me? Oh.
Yes, it's only me. Sorry. Go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sorry.
Okay, so again, thank you for a wonderful and engaging talk. I greatly enjoyed, and on behalf of everyone in the audience, thank you. So there is one question typed in, but you can read that one and answer. And reminder to everyone else that please type in your questions in the Q&A box or in the chat box. And I also have another follow-up question to that. Well, maybe you can start with the type-in question and we can go from there.
So I have a lot of thank yous. Thank you so much.
Yes.
Give it a thank you for my ex-mentor Pascal, which is great to see. Can you see the question there? I couldn't see the question. Could you help me, please?
Yeah, so I'm gonna read out the question regarding. So this is the question that is typed. Regarding the link between vision and hearing and performance in cognitive tests. Mm-hmm. Do we know how much of it is because of the person not being able to see or hear the questions, and how much of it is because, as you said, people with sensory loss go out less and socialize less, so over an extended period, social isolation actually leads to lower cognitive scores?
This is an excellent question, and I believe it is both. No, it's a testable question. It's a super easily testable question, right? Let's take older adults, place them in a room, run the same cognitive test with a hearing aid and without a hearing aid. Do we see improvement of performance? Yes. How much? Let's gauge it. Now let's fit people with a hearing aid for free, like Franklin is doing, and let's send them let's send them out to the wild, and let's test them a year later. If we see a cognitive improvement in performance, we can then say that it's because they hear better. I believe it is both. And as a clinician, I think we have to believe it is both. Because we need to believe that people can change and improve their health based on their action and based of maintaining a healthier lifestyle. This is what we try to do. So I think it's or else what do we do at all, right? Why should we help people have better hearing, better vision? Because I believe it has not only a momentary impact, but also an impact that is changing how they feel about themselves, how they interact, and of course, at the end, it could improve cognitive performance.
Great, thank you. There's a whole bunch of thank yous in the chat box. I'll leave it to you to read the thank yous. They're all saying excellent presentation, loved it, and so on.
There are a lot of people here that I know and I see their names. It's super great to see their names here.
There's another question in the chat box from Elizabeth Rochon. I'm going to read it. Great presentation. Thank you. The mirror experiment was fascinating. Do you think it can be done over Zoom or other platforms, or does it necessitate being in person? That's a good question.
I really tried to do it, but it just failed because of a grad student. It didn't work with her, but we really want to try. So the picture in the beginning for me and my mother is where it was the pretest. I pretested with my mother, with others, and I would love to see if it can work. It's super limited, right? Whereas, however, it was done by these clinicians with people who are limited to chairs, and we still could get these kind of changes. So I believe it not only could be done on Zoom, it should be done on Zoom. Maybe even in the beginning of a session, of a telehealth session, to get, because one of the things we haven't shown is we asked the people at the person at the end, what do you think about this clinician? What do you think about her? And after regular sessions, which are stretching, which is mandatory in this facility, they said, she's okay. After the mirror game, she said, wow, I love her. I feel connected to her. She's warm. I feel that we, and if you ever play the mirror game with another person, it does something that is super unique, and we can measure it. Of course, in the 2 brain studies, we measure it, so we can see it both emotionally, cognitively, and also we can see differences in brain activation. So I'm a believer in mirror games, and I super advocate using them.
Fascinating. Can I ask a follow-up question? So in this video that you showed, who was leading? And also in general, are people looking at the videos, are people able to tell?
So the game goes like this. In session number 1, it's 3 minutes. You need to lead, and the other person has to follow. Usually we give the clinician to do it because the patient's like, what's going on here? But I do it with students. It's amazing. They love it. 3 minutes end. Thank you. Now you, the patient, lead, and I will follow everything you do. 3 minutes. Then it ends. And then the last 3 minutes, you need to move together. And some people can do it, some cannot. But those who can, it is beautiful because you always have to maintain eye contact. Always think about what the other person is doing momentarily. This is one of the issues with Zoom, because I need to look at you, not at myself. And I have to, there is a delay. It's not so easy. We're trying to think of ways, but it's a fun thing to do, and you feel a certain connection with the other person in a 10-minute game. I'm not going to go into all of the brain effects because this is not my field. I'm more interested with the fact that we can see it gets people more engaged with any task they do afterwards, which is super interesting for me because it shows that something that we do naturally without thinking. So this scientist that I work with, she does the 2 brain studies in Synchrony. She shows videos of people sitting in a room. After half an hour, they move without noticing the same way. They sit in the same way. And she has a beautiful study when people watch a film together, and she measures the zygomatic movement, this. And she showed that very quickly they smile together. They do everything together. They are linked. This is something that happens naturally when people are living together. There are some new fascinating studies that show it could also relate to pheromones, to smelling each other, right? There are some links that happen when 2 people are sitting in the same room. And we took this away. And it has a cost. And everybody's focusing on kids, and they should. It's super important. I have 2 kids, and it's a mess. But I think we have to think of the health cost that you are going to see in TRI once it ends with older adults. And it's going to be a huge health cost. And we have to think of how to deal with it and how to fight against it right now. That's my take.
Thank you. There is another question in the chat box. I'm going to read it. This is from Guijin Lee. Hi, Dr. Ben David. Thank you for this wonderful talk. You mentioned that you've been publishing but couldn't convince the literature. What do you think are some important reasons for the difficulty? And as young researchers, sometimes we present evidence other researchers or general public wouldn't buy them simply because it's against what's already established in their belief. What do you advise? And what do you think the reasons were?
My answer will be twofold. One fold is maybe I didn't present enough evidence. Maybe there are people who think that my research is wrong. When I was a postdoc in Toronto, I presented these troop studies that were done when I was in Toronto. And there was a very famous scientist who was super excited to have in the room. And he said, oh, you're all wrong. So maybe they're right. The other option is that maybe I have a point, but it means that people need to stop doing the things they're used to do. And it means that people need to think that cognitive changes in aging are not as large as they assume they are. And these are two things that are very big changes. And again, to blame myself, maybe what me and others need to do is to present more evidence or better evidence to convince people to stop doing what is routine in their labs, which is to use Stroop, for example, this word with color, as a test for cognitive performance, not acknowledging that it also tests color vision, which changes drastically after the age of 60. And by the way, most of these studies are done here in Toronto. I can't remember, I think in Montreal. Tons of studies showing why there's this huge decrease in color vision. But if I were to give an advice, aim high. I think another mistake I made is that I was too afraid to try to send these studies to the top journals. I think you should dare. If you have an idea that's super novel and new, just dare high. Worst case scenario, they will accept the paper. And then you get fame and glory for life.
There's another question in the chat box, in the Q&A that I'll read out loud. This is from Bing Ye. And I assume this is about social isolation, not about the sensory loss. The question is, thank you for your interesting talk. Do you think using Zoom or video conferences as a social interaction tool for older adults shows same or similar effects as face-to-face interaction?
No, I don't think it's enough. I'm not the expert on this, and there is a lot more to read, but I think there is so much missing on Zoom. As I said, some of it could be just pheromones and smell. There is like a new study now published that people sweat together. It makes an effect on studies afterwards. It's like crazy. But it's also the fact that we move together and the fact that we share a place when we are together. We share context. We share the weather. Is it too cold? Is it too, like, we share something. And Zoom is not enough. But maybe this is what the world is going to, and we have to rethink, like Elizabeth Rochon suggested, we have to rethink how we use these video conferences in a way that permits us to get this high quality interaction. And maybe this is what the world is going to. I hope not. I hope not. I think I thought I mastered teaching on Zoom. And then I had one class with the real students, and I was like in tears. I was in tears. Like, they reacted. They smiled. They frowned. I asked them to, to clap their hands or something, and it's like, I had a class. We had a shared moment, right? Today we did a wave. I taught them about sine waves, and they just did this kind of wave in class. We shared a moment. They were laughing about it. It's fun. I can't have it on Zoom. Even though I try and I have like interactive, but maybe I'm old-fashioned, but I feel that there is something about being together. Just like the difference between watching a film on Netflix with the best sound system on your own sofa with quality food and quality drinks. But it's not the same as watching a film in the cinema with, with a soda pop and popcorn that's too greasy. But you're sitting with people around you, and when they smile, you smile. When they cry, you cry. And you share a moment together. I believe we're social creatures. There is enough evidence in the literature right now that shows that this kind of interpersonal synchrony, whether it's movement or seeing each other or smelling each other, I don't know. There is something happening in the synchrony, and we need it. And come on, let's end with this COVID thing. Let's get back to real life.
Here, here. Of course, you're in vaccinated land, envy of the world.
Yes.
We're waiting to get there. Hopefully in a few months.
I can't complain. I can't complain. I can't complain. I went to my daughter went to watch a film, right? Like a real film with her friends, and then I went to see a rock concert with my partner. It's like unbelievable. It's unbelievable. Like there's what it's gonna happen soon.
Fingers crossed. It's a few, or it's 10, 11 minutes past 1 o'clock. So I think it might be good time to wrap up in case people have other classes or things to attend. Once again, thank you so much for a wonderful and engaging talk. On behalf of the Institute and everyone in the audience, I thank you, and everyone, I know you can't hear it, but we're all applauding.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited.
I'm looking forward to hopefully having you in person in the near future.
Let's do it. Thank you so much for attending.
Bye. Thank you.